He was an ordinary mechanic with calloused hands and a heart that only knew how to love. The day the recording studio where his fiancée was tracking vocals caught fire, Leo ran in without a second thought. He saved Chloe from the flames, but left a part of himself inside. Months later, still struggling to recognize himself in the mirror, he heard her say it. "You're not the man I knew anymore." She left, and in that silence, Leo understood. The man who loses everything is sometimes about to become whole. The smoke was already seeping through the cracks of the studio door when Leo arrived. It was late afternoon, and he'd come straight from the shop, his coveralls still stained with grease, as always. From a distance he heard the screams. He recognized her voice amidst the chaos. Chloe. The small building housing the makeshift studio was engulfed in flame. He sprinted, ignoring the pleas to wait for help. He kicked the door in, enveloped by heat and darkness. Inside, Chloe was coughing, trapped in the corner of the recording booth. The fire crackled, ferocious. Without thinking, Leo wrapped her in his jacket, lifted her into his arms, and ran back down the burning hallway. It was at the exit that it happened. A blazing support beam fell on him. Chloe escaped. He didn't. The impact was a dull thud. Leo's body collapsed, partially covered by the flames, and as she screamed from the outside, he passed out, burning inside and out. Leo was always the kind of man who didn't draw attention. He lived with grease under his fingernails, an easy smile, and shoulders slightly slumped from carrying the weight of his own silences. He woke before the sun, drank black coffee from a ceramic mug, and went down to the auto shop his father had left him, inherited too young after sickness, took his old man too soon. He was a good guy. He knew it, but without pride. He had steady hands, calm eyes, and an almost old-fashioned sense of duty, and maybe that's why he fell for someone so different. Chloe was noise, light, a desire for the stage. She was 28 with a raw talent that exploded in every note. Leo met her when she brought in an old convertible for a tune-up. He fumbled with the engine and with his own heart. She found it charming. She came back the next day just to talk. The next week, they were together. In the first few months, everything was an improvised harmony. He'd bring her packed lunches to the studio. She'd write him notes with off-key love songs. Leo loved watching her sing, even when no one else was listening. And she said he was the only one who saw her without her makeup on. But time began to throw that melody out of tune. Chloe wanted to rise, to shine, to have status. And Leo, he just wanted her. "You could try to dress a little better when you go out with me," she said once, not looking at him. "It's just dinner, honey, and I like you this way," he replied, adjusting the collar of his work shirt. She laughed, but it wasn't real. The differences became invisible walls. He took pride in swapping out a clutch in record time. She, in getting noticed by a producer. And still, Leo didn't complain. He worked double shifts to pay for her vocal lessons. He'd skip his own lunch to save up for a better microphone for her. He thought that's what love was, adding yourself to the equation, even when the other person starts to subtract. But one night, watching her rehearse in front of some industry friends, he heard one of them ask, "Is that your brother?" And she replied without hesitating, "He's just someone who helps me out." That's when something inside Leo started to burn. Long before the fire. What Leo wanted most in life wasn't fame, fortune, or recognition. It was to build something that would last. A shop with his name on the sign, where he could teach kids from the neighborhood a trade. A house with a porch, where Chloe could practice her songs while he tinkered with an old engine in the background. It was simple, but to him, it was everything. Since he was a kid, Leo learned not to dream too big. His mother used to say that working men couldn't afford to want the impossible, but he dreamed anyway, in silence. He saved cash in an old paint can, jotted down business ideas in a notebook hidden in his closet, and whenever Chloe talked about a bright future, he'd smile and imagine a place where they both fit. "When I have my own shop, you'll sing just for me on my lunch break," he'd say, lying on the couch with her head on his chest. "And what if I'm on tour?" she'd tease. "Then I'll sing, and you'll remember me when you hear it on the radio in some dressing room." He thought that was love, trying to make each other fit inside your own dream. But over time, he realized her dreams needed an audience, applause, spotlights, and his just needed solid ground. Chloe started to resent the limits of their reality, the bills, the packed lunches, the smell of motor oil. She started going out alone, dressing up more for events and less for him. And Leo, even though he noticed, chose silence. One night, he came home and found an invitation on the table, showcase with A&R executives. It was her big moment. Leo read it and felt his chest tighten. He knew that if this worked out, she might leave. But still, the next day, he sold his most expensive watch, a gift from his father, to buy her a new dress. "I want you to feel like a star," he said, handing her the box. She smiled, but it was a short smile. The night of the performance, Leo stood outside the venue, looking through the window. She seemed to float on the small stage, hair loose, eyes shining, voice steady. And there he was, his hands still dirty from work and his chest full of pride. When she finished, Chloe was surrounded. Photos, compliments, business cards. Leo stayed back, not wanting to get in the way, and when she finally came over to him, she looked embarrassed. "I think I'm going to go out with the label guys. Everything's happening so fast." "Of course," he said, swallowing the lump in his throat, "but just promise me that when all this is over, you'll come back to me." She kissed his cheek, like she was kissing a brother. "I'll text you tomorrow, okay?" And she left. That night, Leo went home alone. He sat on the bed, looking at the dress hanging on the chair. The radio played softly. He looked at the ceiling and tried to believe that everything was still in its place. Deep down, Leo didn't want applause. He just wanted to be someone that someone else wanted to come home to. Chloe's success didn't come all at once, but it started to hang around the edges of their life like a loud promise. A video of her performance went viral on a local blog, and a mid-level producer invited her to join an artist development program. Leo was genuinely happy. He made a point of picking her up from rehearsals, even after a 10-hour shift. He'd wait outside, holding her dinner in a Tupperware wrapped in a dish towel. "You don't have to do this, Leo." "I know, but I want to." Chloe smiled, but again, only with her mouth. Something about her always seemed distant, even when she was right there. She started to change little things, asked him to stop picking her up in his greasy coveralls, asked him not to comment on her photos with tacky emojis. She asked for distance without using the word. At the shop, Leo spent his days in silence. He worked twice as hard to fill the emptiness growing inside him. At night, he'd stare at the garage space he wanted to turn into his own shop, but he no longer knew if it was worth it, if it was for them, or if it was just for him. One evening, Chloe came home with shining eyes. "The producer said I can record a demo with his band, but the studio is on the other side of town. It's a little farther." Leo smiled, trying to keep the light in his own eyes. "I'll drive you." "No need, they're sending a car. And it would be better if you didn't come, okay? It's a more professional environment." He fell silent, swallowed hard and nodded. The distance was no longer symbolic. She started staying out late more often. The excuse was always rehearsals that went all night. He pretended to believe it. He didn't want a confrontation. He was afraid of the answer. Slowly, Leo stopped making plans. The shop? Silence. The notebook of ideas? Closed. The money in the paint can? Untouched. He didn't complain. He just watched, like someone watching their own life being carried away by a person who never wanted to stay. One afternoon, he found Chloe sitting on the sofa, staring intently at her phone. "Is everything okay?" he asked. "The label wants us to rebrand the band's image, and they think, well, that it's better not to have public relationships right now." It took Leo a moment to understand. "You want me to disappear from your life?" She didn't answer. She just kept swiping her finger across the screen in silence. It was then that he understood. Chloe didn't need him anymore, At least, not in front of other people. That same night, he made her favorite dinner, homemade mac and cheese with a breadcrumb crust. He lit candles, put on an old soul record, cleaned the entire apartment. He waited. When she walked in, she barely glanced at the table. She kicked off her heels and said, "Did you know my producer thinks the public will find it weird if they know I'm dating a mechanic?" He didn't answer. He just stared at the flickering candle, trying not to be extinguished inside. "Are you ashamed of me, Chloe?" She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either, and that hurt more. Days later, she got the confirmation. She would record a solo EP with the label's backing. It was the biggest step of her career. Leo tried to celebrate, tried to forget everything, tried not to see the signs, until the day of the fire. And then, nothing could be ignored any longer. Leo woke up slowly. The white hospital lights burned his eyes. His entire body felt like it was made of stone and pain. He tried to move his leg, but the weight of the bandages held him down. He tried to speak, but his throat was raw. Beside him, the beep of the heart monitor marked the fragility of what still pulsed. Then the door opened. Chloe came in. No makeup, but her hair was carefully styled. She wore an unreadable expression. He smiled, with difficulty. "Are you okay? I got you out, right?" She nodded, avoiding his gaze. She sat on the edge of the bed, but without touching him. Did the doctor explain what happened? Just that it was bad, but that you saved me. Leo looked at the ceiling. The memories came in flashes. The smoke, the heat, the beam falling, his body shielding hers. "It was worth it. I'd do it again, for you." She was silent for a long time. And then, as if she could no longer stand playing the role of the caregiver, she stood up abruptly. "Leo, I don't know how to say this." He felt a strange chill in his chest. "Say what?" They had to amputate Leo, a part of it, because of the burns. He didn't understand at first, but her tone explained what the words were trying to soften. My genitals?" She nodded. "They couldn't save it. The doctor said you won't be able to be a father or a man." The phrase escaped him before he could think. Chloe hesitated, then swallowed hard. "You're special, Leo. You always were, but I'm still young. I have a career and desires. You're leaving me." She didn't answer, just lowered her head, a silent confession. "You saved me, I know, but now I can't look at you and see what we were." He remained silent. The heart monitor sped up, but on the outside he didn't move. "So that's it. I'm sorry." She grabbed her purse, turned, and before leaving she whispered, "I'm not strong like you, Leo." And she left. No hug, no promises, no looking back. Days later, the news of the fire appeared in an entertainment column, promising singer saved by mechanic during studio fire. The article praised Chloe as the rising star, a victim of an unexpected accident. Leo was mentioned as a friend of the artist. He read the article in silence, the paper trembling in his hands. Chloe hadn't just erased him from her life, she had erased him from the story. The following week, she appeared on a local morning show. She smiled for the cameras, talked about the scare, about overcoming it, about her new projects. When the host asked about the young man who saved her, she deflected, "We're not in touch anymore." It was a spur-of-the-moment thing. In his hospital bed, Leo turned off the TV, and for the first time he felt rage, not from the pain, but from the way he was being forgotten. In the hallway, two nurses were talking in low voices. "He was her fiancé, right?" "I think so. They say she wants nothing to do with him now." Leo heard them. Every word was a new burn. But this time, it was internal. On Sunday, a man from Chloe's record label showed up at the hospital. He said she was in a different phase of her career, that it was best to avoid exposure, and that, if Leo could not speak to the press, that would be great. Leo just looked at the man and said, "I don't want exposure. I just wanted her to stay." The man shrugged and left. That night, a news crew tried to get into the hospital. One of the nurses warned Leo, "They came to try and interview you. They want the silent hero's side of the story." He refused. There was no heroism in feeling mutilated, inside and out. Hours later, a bouquet of flowers arrived in his room. No card, but Leo recognized the scent. It was the same perfume Chloe wore. He didn't cry or smile. He just asked for the arrangement to be removed. There, between white walls, tubes and bandages, he understood. The fire hadn't destroyed him, but her love had. The following days were all the same. White light on the ceiling, the sound of monitors, the smell of antiseptic that clung to his nose and the back of his soul. Leo would wake up, but he wouldn't emerge. He didn't speak, didn't eat properly. He just stared at the ceiling with the expression of someone who no longer belonged to his own body. When the nurses asked how he was feeling, he would just turn his head away. He felt nothing, or maybe he felt everything at once, but without a name for it. The body covered in bandages hid more than burns. It hid an emptiness he didn't know where it began. During a dressing change, a nurse accidentally pulled the sheet back too far. Leo saw it, for a second, and that was enough. He squeezed his eyes shut. What he saw was no longer the body he knew. It was a rough sketch of what was once a man. That night he tried to sleep, but he couldn't close the door to his thoughts. Chloe's voice visited him like a constant whisper. "You're not the man I knew anymore." Early the next week, a hospital psychologist tried to talk to him, spoke of trauma, identity, rehabilitation. Leo just listened. He didn't disagree, but he didn't react either. Until the psychologist asked, "Do you have anyone to count on?" Leo replied for the first time in a low voice, "I did." And then silence. Breakfast was left on the tray, untouched. Lunch, cold. Dinner sent back. One of the nurses commented in the hallway, "If he keeps this up, even physical therapy won't help. He's checking out without ever leaving the bed." On Friday afternoon, a new professional entered his room. She wasn't wearing a white coat. She wore a burgundy jacket, carried a clipboard, and had a discreet smile. "Leo Kowalski?" He didn't answer. "My name is Grace. I'm the new physical therapist on the unit. I'll be overseeing your rehabilitation." He blinked slowly, staring at the ceiling. "If you want to ignore me, that's fine. But I'll be back tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that, too." She adjusted his pillows, opened the curtain a little, and let the late afternoon light stream in. A warm ray fell across the bed, heating the sheet, and for the first time in days, Leo blinked harder. "Looks like the sun still exists out there, huh?" She smiled. "Even when everything collapses, it doesn't stop. Life is like that, Leo. It can seem cruel, or it can be an invitation." She said nothing more, just left a notebook on the bedside table. "It's nothing fancy, but writing always saved me." And she left. Leo didn't pick up the notebook that day, but he looked at it, and that was more than nothing. That night, sleep came in pieces, no dreams, just a light numbness, as if he needed to rest, not his body, but his soul. The next morning, Grace returned. She brought a thermos and 2 plastic cups. "Chamomile tea. They say it's calming." Leo said nothing, but he extended his hand. He took a sip. Warm, sweet, simple, like a piece of a childhood he couldn't even remember. Grace sat beside the bed, unhurried. "You know, my brother lost the use of his legs in a car accident. I was 10. I spent my childhood hearing him say he wasn't a man anymore." Leo looked her in the eyes for the first time. But he was. He still was. He had just forgotten it for a while. She smiled, but without pity, without sorrow, with a calmness that could break through any wall. Mr. Kowalski lost a part of himself, but he didn't lose everything. Believe me, I've seen whole men break a lot more easily than you. Leo didn't answer, but his eyes welled up, and she said nothing more. Didn't ask. She just placed her hand on his, firm, warm, present. That night, when the staff turned out the lights and the hallway fell silent, Leo reached for the notebook. He opened it to the first blank page. He stared at it for a while, then he wrote a single word, "still," and then he closed his eyes, this time, feeling that maybe, just maybe, there was a beginning saved for him after the end. Have you ever felt like someone tore a piece of you away and just walked off, Have you ever tried to look in the mirror and no longer recognize yourself? If you've ever had to relearn how to exist after an invisible pain, comment, "I'm here." Sometimes, just knowing you're not alone changes everything. The next day, Grace returned with a surprise. "Today, we're going for a walk." Leo frowned, suspicious. "A walk?" She pointed to the wheelchair. "Just to the hospital garden. It's a beautiful day out there, and you can't hide from the world forever." He hesitated, but he didn't resist. He let her help him into the chair, despite the discomfort of a body still in adaptation. Every movement was a painful reminder of what he'd lost. But strangely, being next to Grace made it all less unbearable. Outside, the world went on. People laughed on their phones. A father played with his son on the sidewalk. And the smell of freshly cut grass mixed with the scent of coffee from the cafeteria. Leo took a deep breath. It had been weeks since he'd felt the air on his face. "It feels like another planet out here." "That's because you were locked in a world that no longer belonged to you." She parked the chair under a tree and sat on the bench beside him. "Have you thought about leaving here different than how you came in?" He gave a short, bitter laugh. "What do you mean? I'm leaving with less than I came in with." She didn't blink. "What if you left more whole?" Leo fell silent, not for lack of an answer, but because that question pierced him. "You talk as if I still have a choice." "You always do." In the days that followed, Grace didn't try to rush the process, but she insisted on the essentials: movement, contact, conversation. She made him laugh, with terrible jokes. She brought simple cakes wrapped in colorful dish towels. She talked about her own life without turning everything into a tragedy. She didn't treat Leo like a victim. She treated him like a man. And that was new. During one session, as he tried to balance with support, he felt his body falter. "I can't do it." "Yes, you can. One step at a time. I've got you." And she held him. Not just his body, but his fear, his shame. The idea that he was no longer useful. In the third week, Grace arrived with a simple package. A gift. Leo opened it. It was a pair of leather work gloves, new, strong, for when you go back to working on cars. He stared at the gift for a few seconds. "What if I never can again?" "Then they'll remind you of who you can still be." That night, alone in his room, Leo picked up the notebook and wrote another word: possible. It was Grace who encouraged him to use his phone again, who helped him set up a new email account, who asked, "What if you started from scratch?" Not as a victim, but as a survivor who now gets to choose. She helped him create a professional profile, suggested he start teaching what he knew about auto mechanics online. She recorded the first few videos with him. He wasn't ready to show his face, but his voice, firm, experienced, humble, began to reach people. "Do you have any idea what you're doing, Leo?" "No. You're teaching people who never had a chance. You're showing them that even when you're broken, you can still fix other people's worlds." He smiled, for the first time a real smile. "And who fixes mine? Nobody does that alone. But if you want help, I'm here." From then on, something shifted. The pain was still there. The absence, too. But with Grace by his side, Leo felt it was no longer just about what he'd lost. It was about what he could still build. Leo started getting up before breakfast. He no longer waited for the nurses. He made his own bed, albeit slowly. He changed his own clothes, with limited but determined movements. Grace noticed the details, the way he held his toothbrush with more firmness, the care with which he combed his hair. "You're starting to come back." "I'm trying, at least." She would smile. She never pushed him, but she celebrated every small step as if he'd won a marathon. Physical therapy became a daily routine, first in the hallway, then in the exercise room. Leo used crutches, then a walker, and when he finally managed to take 7 steps without any help, he stopped, looked at Grace, and laughed. 7 steps. And here I am, feeling like a champion. Well, isn't that what champions do? They overcome what seemed impossible. At night, alone, Leo would look at his notebook. He wrote down fragmented phrases, scattered words. Man. Scar. New chance. The shop was still a distant dream, but he began to list parts, to sketch out a simple floor plan. Grace helped him create a timeline. Even if you don't open it now, this project can be your North Star. What if I'm not respected in the field anymore? Then you build a new field. The channel with his mechanic videos was growing slowly. Some subscribers commented, "You explain things like no one else. You can tell you know your stuff. You should teach a class." Leo read everything, at first with suspicion, then with gratitude. One evening, Grace brought in a package, a small lapel microphone and a desk lamp. "Now your lessons will have better quality. Are you investing in me?" "No, I'm giving back to the world what's still good in it." He was silent, but his eyes said everything. One Sunday morning, Leo decided to visit the old shop. He got permission to leave for a few hours. Grace went with him. The place had been closed for months. The sign was faded, the storefront dirty, but still, it was home. He walked in slowly. The smell of oil and iron was the same. He leaned on the workbench, ran his hand over the dust and sighed. This was where I felt like someone, and you can be again." She took a photo of him there from behind, looking into the empty shop. "This picture is already a new beginning." On the way back, he asked, "Do you really believe you can rebuild everything?" "No, but you can build something new." But not everything was progress. Some mornings, Leo would freeze. He didn't want to get out of bed. The mirror still hurt. The absence of Chloe returned like a shadow, sometimes in dreams, sometimes in memories. "I was left as if I wasn't worth anything anymore. You weren't the one who lost." She was. Grace always said this with a firmness that wasn't romanticized. She knew where it hurt, but she wouldn't let him stay there. "You have the right to feel everything. You just can't forget who you still are." One afternoon he asked, "Why do you care so much?" She answered with a soft gaze, "Because I know what it's like to be left behind by something you didn't ask for." Silence, understanding, respect. Their affection wasn't an explosion. It was made of roots, of small gestures, quiet jokes, simple cakes, and hands that hold on tight. At the end of the second month, Leo began to walk without support, still slowly, still with pain, but standing. In the last session of that week, Grace walked into the room and stopped suddenly. Leo was on his feet, wearing the gloves she had given him. He was pushing a cart with parts he had organized himself. A makeshift workshop in the hospital's back patio was beginning to take shape. She smiled. "Can I just say, that is sexy." "Sexy? A patched-up mechanic? A man rebuilding himself. That is incredibly sexy." And Leo laughed, not with scorn, but with relief. For the first time in a long time, he felt whole, even with the parts that were missing. The event wasn't anything grand, a local skills fair sponsored by a neighborhood non-profit. But for Leo, it was a kind of debut, not as a singer, actor, or businessman, but as someone who had dared to be reborn. It took months of preparation. Grace helped with materials and contacts. He built a small booth himself from recycled wood pallets to showcase his new project, Motor City Mechanics, a free workshop for young apprentices. The name was simple, but the idea was big: to teach for free everything he had learned from his father and from life to at-risk youth who had no idea how to hold a wrench. On the day of the event, Leo arrived early. He wore a button-down shirt, was clean-shaven, his hair neatly combed. Though shy, he wanted to look professional. But what drew the most attention wasn't his appearance. It was his eyes. There was something in them that hadn't existed months before. A quiet strength, like someone who carries scars and is no longer afraid to show them. The booth soon attracted curious onlookers, teenagers fascinated by the organized tools, parents wanting to know how it worked, volunteers offering support. A woman from the organizing committee approached, smiling. "Your project has caught the attention of the local news. They'd like to do a quick interview. Would that be okay?" Leo hesitated. He looked around, felt his palms sweat. But then he saw Grace across the way, holding a cup of juice and smiling with her eyes. He took a deep breath. "Yeah, That'd be okay. The reporter was young, enthusiastic. We're here with Leo Kowalski, the creator of an incredible social project that combines technical skills with inclusion. Leo, tell us, what motivated you to create this? He swallowed hard. He held the microphone carefully, as if it were fragile, and he said, I was a man who lost almost everything. And when I say everything, I'm not just talking about my body. I lost the person I thought loved me. I lost my identity. I lost the will to live. The reporter looked at him, surprised. The crowd around them stopped to listen. But one day, someone saw me when I couldn't see myself anymore. And she reminded me that you don't have to be whole to be enough. That dignity doesn't depend on the shape you're in, but on the strength you carry. The silence was absolute, until a spontaneous round of applause erupted. He continued, this project is just a way of giving back what was given to me. A second chance. If I could rebuild myself, others can too. The interview aired that same night, and the next day his phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Companies wanting to help, young people sending messages saying they felt represented. A major auto industry blog published an article, The Man Who Lost Everything But Came Back to Teach What Really Matters. Grace watched the report sitting next to him on the sofa. When she saw him on screen saying, you don't have to be whole to be enough, her eyes welled up. Do you have any idea what you just did? I told the truth. No. You said what a lot of people needed to hear. He turned his head slowly and took her hand. If it wasn't for you, she cut him off with a smile. No, if it wasn't for you. 2 weeks later, Leo was invited to speak at a national conference on social innovation. In the audience were entrepreneurs, educators, investors. It was a large auditorium, bright lights, a lapel mic. He hesitated to accept. It's too much. I'm just a mechanic. No. You're the kind of man we need to hear from more often. Grace went with him. At the entrance to the auditorium, as he adjusted his shirt collar, she placed a small chain around his neck, a pendant in the shape of a gear, to remind you that you still make everything turn. On stage, Leo stood in front of the projection screen. The image was of him, standing in the old shop, his back to the camera, facing the emptiness. He began, this photo was taken the day I went back to a place that used to define me. I thought I no longer belonged anywhere, but I discovered that you can occupy new spaces, even after everything. He told his story calmly, without playing the victim, without sugarcoating the tragedy, but letting each sentence be a key that unlocked doors in the hearts of the audience. When he finished, there wasn't just applause. There were people on their feet, crying, and a collective feeling of respect. In the green room, Leo looked at himself in the mirror. For the first time, he didn't look for the missing parts. He just saw a man there, whole. Life has a funny way of bringing certain encounters back around. Leo's speech resonated more than he ever imagined. It went viral on social media, became a motivational video clip. Many people shared it with captions like, pain can't destroy someone who discovers their own worth. This man is a giant. And that's how the video reached her. Chloe, in a dance studio, surrounded by mirrors, she paused her rehearsal when she heard that familiar name. She looked at her phone in disbelief. On the screen, Leo was speaking to a crowd. Months earlier, she had left him in the hospital with dry eyes and a soul in a hurry. Now he was there, standing, receiving a standing ovation. And she was still stuck in contracts that fell through, promises that weren't kept, and a career that had stalled right after the fire. The producer who had bet on her disappeared. The EP was never released. The people who surrounded her had evaporated at the first sign of trouble. And the worst part, she knew Leo had been the only person who truly loved her, before the stage, before the lights, before everything. Days later, Chloe showed up at the launch of Leo's social project. He was in the courtyard of a public school, inaugurating the first free workshop school for vulnerable teens. He wore a simple white shirt and was smiling beside Grace, who was organizing the volunteers. The scene looked like something from a place Chloe had never been. a world where people smiled without needing an audience. She approached slowly, hesitantly, her eyes fixed on him. Leo sensed her before he saw her. The silence around him shifted. He turned and saw her. They stood face to face for a moment too long to be comfortable. "Leo, Chloe," she forced a smile. "You look different." "I am." Grace quietly stepped away, respecting the moment, but with watchful eyes. Chloe tried again. "I saw the speech. I wanted to congratulate you. You became someone." Leo remained calm. "I was always someone. It just took a while for people to see it." She swallowed hard. "I think I was really wrong about us." "You were, but that's not why we're here right now." "Do you think there's any chance for us to talk, to start over?" The world seemed to hang suspended for a second. Leo took a deep breath. He looked at her with a gaze that mixed compassion and distance. "Chloe, when you left, I fell apart. The pain you left wasn't just in my body, it was in my soul. I know, I was weak. No, you were just who you needed to be in that moment. But I also needed to become who I am. Without you." She lowered her eyes. "You're with her, aren't you? The physical therapist." "I am. Grace saw me when I couldn't even see myself. She stayed when I had nothing to offer. And she helped me rebuild without asking for anything in return. She must be amazing." "She is." The silence set in. The sound of the young people laughing in the background contrasted with the knot in Chloe's chest. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry." Leo nodded. "I was sorry too, but for forgetting who I was while trying to hold on to you." She closed her eyes tightly, as if holding back tears no one could see. "Will you ever really forgive me?" "I already have. But forgiveness isn't an invitation to come back. It's just a way to move on in peace." She didn't answer. Just looked around as if searching for a place where she might fit again, but it was too late. Before she walked away, he said, "You'll find what you're looking for, but it won't be where you left it." She walked away, slowly, without drama, like someone who understands they've lost what they didn't know how to value. Minutes later, Grace came over. "Are you okay?" "I am. Want to talk about it?" "No need. I just want to keep moving forward from here." Grace laced her fingers through his, and that was enough. At the end of the afternoon, one of the students from the workshop approached with a crumpled letter. "Mr. Leo, I wrote this in class today. I wanted to give it to you." He opened it. "You're the first adult who believes I can learn something. One day I want to be like you. Thank you." Leo read it and smiled, his eyes wet. Grace watched him from a distance. She knew that this man, once considered a mistake by the woman he loved most, was now a role model for kids who never even had a chance to dream. And that night, as they closed the workshop together, Leo turned off the light, looked up at the ceiling, and whispered, "Thank you, God, for not letting me die that day. I thought I had lost everything, but really, I was just getting started." We grow up thinking love is what comes with pretty words, eternal promises, and grand gestures. But after the fall, after the loss, after the abandonment, Leo discovered that real love starts somewhere else, with self-respect. For a long time he thought he had to prove his worth, that he needed to be enough for someone to stay. And when Chloe left, he believed it was a life sentence. But it wasn't. It was just the end of an illusion, and the beginning of a truth. He understood that being a man has nothing to do with what his body lost. It has to do with how you get back up, with what you build when no one else believes in you, with the dignity to look in the mirror, and even with the scars say, "You're still here." Leo learned that there are people who love our light, but there are also those who stay when everything goes dark. And those are the ones who are worth it. Grace never promised anything. She was just there, on the good days and on the days when even he couldn't stand to be himself. And that's what healed him. Not pity, but presence. What he went through taught him that starting over isn't about forgetting what hurt. It's about remembering, without letting it define you. It's accepting that the pain existed, but that it doesn't take away your right to smile again. Today, when Leo walks into the workshop and sees the kids with grease on their hands and a shine in their eyes, He understands nothing was in vain, not the fire, not the loss, not the abandonment. All of it served to shape someone who now no longer needs to be accepted by anyone, because he has already accepted himself completely, and maybe that's true freedom. Months have passed since the workshop school opened. Leo's project has spread across the country as an example of restarting with purpose. Neighboring cities have started to implement similar versions, always mentioning his name as a reference. But Leo didn't want the stage. He wanted results. Today, the workshop runs from Monday to Saturday, with classes in the morning and afternoon. Every student who walks in receives not just an apron, but a vote of confidence. They learn about engines, electrical systems, tools, but also about respect, discipline, and self-esteem. Grace is still by his side. She handles the organizational side, the students with special needs, and what Leo calls the team's emotional maintenance. The two of them live together in a simple house, with a garden full of lavender and a string of lights hanging on the porch. There, the silence isn't empty. It's peace. And on Sundays, when they're not too tired, they sit in the backyard with 2 cups of tea and talk about everything or nothing. And when he holds her hand, there's no rush, just presence. As for Chloe, she disappeared from social media for a while. Some say she quit her career, others that she went abroad to try and start over. But Leo never looked for her again. He didn't miss her, not out of resentment, but because some stories end long before we're ready to accept it. One day, a letter arrived with no return address. Inside, a handwritten note. "You were everything I needed." Before I knew what that meant. It took me a long time to grow up. Thank you for showing me what love was. See. Leo read it in silence, folded the paper, tucked it into the last page of the notebook, where he started writing when all seemed lost. And he never touched it again. Today, he recognizes himself in the eyes of those who learn from him, in the trembling hands of the kids holding their first tool, in the shy hug from parents who thank him for a future that now seems possible. And when someone asks, "How did you manage to come back after all that?" he answers with a slight smile, "I didn't come back, I rebuilt. And sometimes that's better." If this story touched you in some way, if it made your heart ache or reminded you of someone who deserved a second chance, leave a like. It shows us we're on the right path. Tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. I read every single one and always reply to those who take a moment to chat with me here. If you believe in the power of real, emotional and transformative stories, subscribe to the channel. We're just getting started, and your presence here makes all the difference. And don't go just yet. Choose one of the 2 stories I've left on the screen for you to watch next. I'll see you in the next video.